The planning process. Class lecture, June 6th through 12th, 2011. The outline for this week's lecture will take us through the basic design elements of a differentiated instructional unit. We will focus on how you can use Bloom's taxonomy and multiple intelligences to vary your instruction to create tiered assignments. Through your readings, you will learn that tiered assignments are a fundamental aspect to differentiated instruction. So let's get started. Now I realize that all of y'all are well versed in designing instructional units, so I do not want to belabor this point. However, when designing a differentiated instructional unit, you need to consider how it fits into a larger curriculum design process. It is imperative that process skills are continually developed and built upon. This will allow you to conduct more effective formative assessments and continually vary your teaching style. So, do not think that I'm speaking down to you. I just want to get everyone on the same page with these concepts of differentiated instruction. To begin the planning process, you need to identify the content and themes based on that particular content. By generating themes based on content, it would allow you to tie multiple units together, which will ultimately allow students to begin to see larger content-specific issues. For example, a unit on ancient Greece. You could generate two particular themes. One, essential elements of a civilization, and two, essential elements of religion. By generating these themes, you could have students revisit these same themes in later units. For instance, a unit on ancient China, an unit on ancient Egypt, or even a unit on contemporary America. Each of these units would allow you to investigate essential units of a civilization and essential elements of a religion. So, for any given subject or discipline, there would be a few themes that would guide the entire course of study. Now, Hecox presents this information a little differently, in that she introduces this idea as part of the essential questions section. However, I see them as driving your essential questions. Next, you need to develop essential questions that relate to your themes. Essential questions are a critical planning element. These questions help students to focus on important aspects of essential questions and essential learnings. Now, essential questions also help to emphasize that continual questioning is a critical component of a unit. Together, essential learnings and essential questions identify the understandings and processes that all students must attain and, in doing so, provide the anchor for a unit. Furthermore, it is important that you write these in ways to avoid questions that prompt simple yes and no responses. So as you read through the Hecox text, practice creating essential questions for a previously generated unit that you have taught in the past. This will allow you to become more comfortable with creating differentiated units of instruction. So, once you have the essential questions in place, you will develop unit questions. Unit questions are a way of breaking down the essential questions of a unit into more focused pieces. They can focus on the specifics of a unit, such as developing vocabulary, guiding research, or exploring terms and concepts. Now, to make them the most useful, unit questions should be written to guide inquiry and uncover the essential questions and learnings of a unit. Sequence them to provide the flow of a unit. To support differentiated instruction, develop unit questions that provide options and flexibility for students with different interests, backgrounds, and abilities. Tier or scaffold questions to accommodate different paths and allow students to investigate what is most interesting and relevant to their learning needs. The next part of the lecture will cover Bloom's taxonomy and multiple intelligences. There are 8 different types of intelligences that were identified by Howard Gardner. Most people are a mixture of the various types, but may lean more towards 1 or 2 intelligences. So assessing learning styles of students at the beginning of the year can provide you with valued information. Sometime during the first week of school, you should give each of your students a multiple intelligence test. Score the test and discuss with the students what each learning style means and what each learning style means and what needs are needed in order for these individuals to learn. Doing so will not only help you, but will also help the student. It will allow them to take ownership of their learning because it will allow them to provide you with ideas that might aid them in their understanding of the content that's going to be taught. Many students actually do not realize the vast variety of ways information can be taught. In helping students to understand how they learn, you will be able to pull from resources to ensure that you are providing the optimal opportunity for every one of your students to learn. In differentiating instruction for various learners represented in the classroom, teachers must take each student's background, knowledge, readiness, languages, preferences in learning, and interest into account. From there, lessons can be differentiated into three areas: content, process, and products. So in differentiating content, instruction is largely dependent upon learning goals, which are typically set by state standards. Rather than focusing on minute details or facts, instructional objectives will be broad. Differentiating by process means allowing students to work together in an effort to learn new skills. This type of flexible grouping is strongly encouraged and enables students to play off each other's strengths. Organization and caution in selecting appropriate strategies to address curricular goals is absolutely necessary when differentiating instruction. Next, when teachers differentiate by product, they allow students to choose the outcome. Now, choice is strongly encouraged in the differentiated classroom, and we will deal more about choice in next week's lecture. But when varying by products, teachers need to individualize expectation and requirements. I find that giving rubrics is a great way to express those expectations, and it's also a good idea to provide those rubrics at the beginning of the unit so that students will have the opportunity to achieve and meet all the stated objectives. So as you move through this course, I strongly suggest you use the integration matrix in Hecox's book on pages 78 through 79. This will help you plan according to both Bloom's taxonomy and Gardner's multiple intelligences. So let's take a look at Bloom's taxonomy. Bloom's taxonomy is a spectrum of task difficulty. It goes from easy tasks such as recalling knowledge to harder tasks such as evaluating an argument. It deals with cognitive learning, but a similar approach can be used in other sorts of learning. It is important to realize that the spectrum of Bloom's taxonomy should appear at every academic level. All students need both simple and developmental tasks that help them build basic process skills and advanced tasks that help them build advanced real-world process skills. Lower order thinking skills, identified by Bloom, address mastery tasks, while the higher order thinking skills address developmental tasks. A mixture of developmental and mastery tasks ensure that weak students achieve some success, while the most able students are stretched beyond what they thought they could previously learn. So mastery tasks have the following characteristics. They are easy, typically involving only knowledge and comprehension. They are not dependent on prior learning. They can be attained in a short time, sometimes minutes, and 100% of the students should be able to get them 100% right. Because they are time rather than ability dependent, mastery skills allow weaker students and more able students to enjoy success. It reinforces their ability and establishes motivation, which will allow learning to take place. Developmental tasks have the following characteristics. They are more difficult. They are highly dependent upon prior learning. Students shouldn't be able to get 100% of them correct. Development is slow and requires considerable effort. They involve higher order thinking skills such as evaluation and synthesis. The importance of developmental objectives or tasks lies in their ability to maximize individual development and to stretch all students. Continuous development rather than complete mastery is expected. Using mastery and developmental tasks in practice. Difficult developmental tasks can be broken down into introductory mastery tasks, followed by simpler developmental tasks. The mastery task should prepare the student for the developmental task. In this way, Bloom's taxonomy is used as a ladder, allowing all students to climb to success. Now, tiered instruction blends assessment and instruction. Before initiating each segment of learning, the teacher completes a pre-assessment to determine what students know and then prescribes content materials and learning experiences that promote continued learning for each student. As teachers consider students' assessed readiness levels, it becomes obvious that everyone is not at the same place in their learning and that different tiered tasks are needed to optimize every student's classroom experience. Tiered instruction aligns complexity to the readiness level and learning needs of the students. The teacher plans different kinds and degrees of instructional support and structure depending upon each student's level. Tiered instruction allows all students to focus on essential concepts and skills, yet still be challenged at different levels on which they are individually capable of working. Ideally, Tiered learning tasks engage students slightly beyond what they find easy or comfortable in order to provide genuine challenge and to promote their continued learning. Optimally, a tiered task is neither too simple, so that it leads to boredom, nor too difficult, so that it results in frustration. As Tomlinson cautions, only when students work at appropriate challenge levels do they develop the essential habits of persistence, curiosity, and willingness to take intellectual risks. Some make the analogy that tiered instruction is like a stairwell, while others say is like a ladder. I've even heard a few relate it to an elevator. Whichever one you find the most comfortable, you must recognize that tiered instruction is at the heart of differentiated instruction. The beginning, say the first floor, story, or rung, represents learning tasks for students with less readiness and fewer skills. The stairwell, ladder, or elevator continues upward through enough levels to reach the appropriate challenge for advanced readiness with students with very high skills and complex understanding. There isn't always a student working on every stair level, working on every rung, or on every floor that the elevator reaches, as students progress through tiers of learning at different paces. Also, within each tier, there simultaneously can be multiple small group activities presenting different ways to learn. Some floors in the stairwell will even have multiple stairways, as students access higher levels differently. The word tier does not mean that you create stagnant, low, middle, or high groups of students that are labeled as those who can and cannot learn. Now, I do not like to use the terms low, middle, and high when describing this concept, but we will use it for these purposes. Heacock states it well when she says that tiered assignments are based on students' common learning needs. Thus, it is important to remember that just because a student is labeled as gifted, that does not mean that they need help with learning specific learning, that they do not need help with learning specific skills. In fact, this is a key concept. It is called asynchronous development. Asynchronous development refers to the fact that we all develop skills at different rates. Tiered assignments denote all children as able to learn the same essential skills just in different ways. The makeup of students working at each tier varies with the content, assignment, and quality of tiers. So plan the number of levels most appropriate for instruction. Different quantities of tiers are needed for different curricular areas, concepts, and skills in relation to different learner needs. Sometimes 2 tiers are sufficient. At other times 3 to 5 may work better depending on your classroom need. Recognize that complexity is relative. The complexity of a tiered assignment is relative because it is determined by the specific needs of the students and because learners' readiness levels vary in different curricular areas. In classes with below grade level learners, the lowest tier will respond to those students. In classes in which all students are at or above grade level, the lowest tier would respond to grade level or even above grade level readiness. Next, make sure you promote high-level thinking in each tier. The background and readiness levels of students should not limit the range of thinking opportunities provided through tiered assignments. Avoid always allocating simple tasks for students with the fewest skills. All students need opportunities to analyze, synthesize, and evaluate information. Provide teacher support at every tier. Every tier requires teacher modeling and support for students working at that tier. All learners benefit from a teacher's instruction, interaction, guidance, and feedback. Even gifted children, with some educators perceive as always making it on. Even gifted children, whom some educators perceive as always making it on their own, they need help too. These factors should be considered when creating a tiered assignment. Now, one of our class conversations this week will allow us to collaboratively tier an assignment. To participate, you will need to read Chapter 6 in the Heacock's text. And I think that's the best way to get deeper into these particular concepts. When it comes to your first attempt at developing a tiered activity, the best thing to do is to begin with an activity or lesson you have taught in the past. Create an activity that allows for varying level of ability and interest. It is important that you do not water down the activity or lessen your standards. Rather, you should make sure that all students develop the same process skill or learn the same content. Consider an activity that is designed for your middle students. By doing so, you will be meeting the needs of a majority of students in your classroom. Then tier the activity to meet the needs of students who have lower ability levels and those who have higher ability levels. Remember, this is not to say that all gifted students will always be at the high end of the activity or in the highest ability groups. Because of flexible grouping, you will vary the groups. Through my experiences, you can structure groups around students who match up on the multiple intelligence list or with similar interests. One place to start would be for you to attempt the in-class task that we have for this week. A link to this can be found in Module 2 under Class Discussions. So, that's the end of the lecture for this week. Next week we will begin to discuss the idea of choice. In particular, we will discuss menus and how they can help us tier our activities. We will also focus on implementation. Thank you and have a great week.